Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me as we continue our walk through the book of Mark. Last week we were in Mark chapter 1 as we were looking at Jesus calling his disciples and how kind of surprising it was that he just calls them and they drop everything, their identities, their jobs, their families, and follow him. And what we'll see throughout the book of Mark is that the authority that Jesus has is one of the key themes of the book. So last week we saw that Jesus had this authority to just call people and they would follow him. And this week we're going to see again Jesus' authority at work in two different stories. We're starting at verse 21. And it says, Jesus and his companions went to the town of Capernaum. When the Sabbath day came, he went into the synagogue and began to teach. The people were amazed at his teaching, for he taught with real authority, quite unlike the teachers of religious law. Suddenly a man in the synagogue who was possessed by an evil spirit cried out, "Why are you interfering with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus reprimanded him. "Be quiet. Come out of the man," he ordered. At that, the evil spirit screamed, threw the man into a convulsion, and then came out of him. Amazement gripped the audience, and they began to discuss what had happened. "What sort of new teaching is this?" they asked excitedly. "It has such authority. Even evil spirits obey his orders." The news about Jesus spread quickly throughout the entire region of Galilee. And after Jesus left the synagogue with James and John, they went to Simon and Andrew's home. Now Simon's mother-in-law was sick in bed with a high fever. They told Jesus about her right away. So he went to her bedside, took her by the hand, and helped her sit up. Then the fever left her, and she prepared a meal for them. That evening after sunset, many sick and demon-possessed people were brought to Jesus. The whole town gathered at the door to watch. So Jesus healed many people who were sick with various diseases, and he cast out many demons. But because the demons knew who he was, he did not allow them to speak. So that's our reading for this week. And did you see the authority that were there? In fact, I see that in this passage, there are three different authorities that Mark emphasizes. We see that Mark emphasizes first the authority of his teaching. Notice that Mark doesn't really say anything about what he was teaching. It doesn't tell us the content, because Mark isn't really concerned here with telling us the content of his teaching. He's concerned with telling us that the teaching was authoritative, that he was different from the scholars and the teachers of religious law. They would basically speak about God based on what they had studied in the scriptures. But it was different with Jesus because he didn't just speak about God, he spoke for God, as if he was God's ambassador, God's representative. He spoke on God's behalf. So first we see that there was an authority in his teaching. Next we see the authority over demons, right? He tells these demons to shut up and get out. And we see him healing many demons. So there's the authority over demons. And we also see that specifically an authority over fever and then also over other sickness. So Jesus, he was there. He was teaching in the synagogue. They're just amazed at his teaching with true authority. And then this demon just jumps out. And he says, "Why are you interfering with us, Jesus of Nazareth?" It's interesting that he calls Jesus by name. See, to a Greek audience, they would have thought that the demon had the upper hand here, because to have someone's name and to say their name gave you an authority over them in their view. And so the demon calling out Jesus saying, "I know your name, I know who you are," was like the demon trying to exert authority over Jesus. At least that's one way of looking at it. You could say, on the other hand, that he was just saying, Jesus, I know who you are, and why are you here messing with me? And he's afraid. So there's two ways you could look at that. But it is interesting to me that he calls out his name, and then at the end it says that because they knew who he was, Jesus would not allow them to speak. So there's something about that they saw that the demon calling his name as the demon having some kind of authority. It reminds me of the old story of Rumpelstiltskin. Do you remember that? Where he said, your child will belong to me unless you can guess my name within 3 days. It's kind of a story that kind of falls along those lines. Maybe 10 years ago, I guess, there was the show called Once Upon a Time that was on TV. And the first season was really good, by the way. And in that one, Rumpelstiltskin goes around collecting names because they give him this power and this authority. And so it kind of goes from kind of that idea. So just kind of, I'm not saying Rumpelstiltskin is a demon. I'm just saying that the stories kind of connect the idea of the name having power. But even that ploy doesn't have any authority over Jesus. So it's showing, oh, the demon's trying these attacks. And Jesus is just like, shut up. You don't have any authority here. So it's showing that Jesus really has authority over these demons, that he doesn't have to play their games because they're playing these games and he can just be like, no, shut up, get out. You don't have any place here. So showing the level of authority Jesus has over the demons in this case. And it's very interesting. I'm sure you've probably asked, because here it says 2 times in the passage, it says that he ordered him to be quiet. And then at the end it says that he did not allow them to speak because they knew who he was. This shows us that we would say, like, why didn't Jesus want them to say who he is? I mean, wouldn't this be good? Well, actually, no. Jesus is not at all interested in demons testifying to who he is. He does not want demonic testimony. Even if what they're saying is right. He says, Jesus of Nazareth, I know who you are, the Holy One of God. Well, this is true. So what the demon was actually saying was true, but Jesus is not interested in demonic testimony. And that's probably because demonic testimony, even if they say what's right, they use it to mislead and to lead you into what's wrong. Just think about in the other Gospels how the devil tempted Jesus. What did he do? He said true things. He quoted the scripture to Jesus. But Jesus says, no, that's not where this is supposed to take me. That's not what that passage is supposed to imply. So demons will say true things in order to mislead. And so Jesus is not interested in the testimony of demons to support who he is. And I think it's also interesting that it says, after he casts out the demon, I mean, the people are just amazed. It says, amazement gripped the audience. They began to discuss. They're talking back and forth what happened. What sort of new teaching is this? Even evil spirits obey his orders. So again, we have the teaching having authority. They're like, it's this message that he's giving on behalf of God has authority, and has so much authority that the demons have to respond. So Jesus' teaching has authority. Also, I want you to notice that Mark draws a distinction between the workings of demons or demonization and sicknesses. So one thing that we might do is we might look back and say, oh, these people, they didn't know anything about germs, or they didn't have any scientific knowledge, so they just attributed everything to demons. Well, right here we see that that's not the case, that they knew that there was a difference. They knew there was sickness and illness, and then they knew that there were demons who afflicted people, and they were not the same thing. And so even though they did not have the scientific knowledge we have, they didn't know about germs or any other kind of issues like that, they did know there was a difference between demonic activity and sickness. And I think that is something in our modern world that we are missing, because we now attribute everything to physical and I guess scientific issues, like we want to figure everything out as according to this disease or that or this, or even psychological issues, and those are real things. But demons also are active, and we would do well to be aware that there is still demon activity in the world today. We just kind of blind ourselves to it because we don't recognize that there is a difference between demonic activity and just physical reality. So we need to be aware of that as we are moving through life as Christians. So then the next story is we have Jesus goes to Simon and Andrew's house, and they tell him right away that Simon's mother-in-law is sick in bed with a high fever. So we have sickness. And many Jews at the time considered fever to be a specific illness based on the book of Deuteronomy. They thought that a fever represented a heavenly fire sent from God in order to chastise people for something they'd done, and that the only thing that could relieve the fire of the fever was God himself, that he was the only one who could take it away. And so what we see here is, on one sense, just on a purely scientific sense, we see Jesus has authority over illnesses, that he can just heal any kind of physical illness that comes. But to a Jewish mind at that time, it could have implied to them that Jesus has the authority to call off God's judgment, that he can say, enough, we're relieving this fire of judgment from you. So it's associating Jesus' authority with God's authority, because only God could call off that chastisement. Well, Jesus speaks on God's behalf, and he has the authority to call off that chastisement from God. All right, one more thing, and then we'll end. I know we've all read this, and we've all thought, what in the world, this poor lady? The fever left her, and she prepared a meal for them. This poor lady's been sick in bed. She gets healed by Jesus, and immediately she has to get up and get to work. And we're like, wow, that's not fair. But the thing about this is this is one of those occasions where sometimes we see the women in the Bible getting it and the men not getting it. This is one of those cases, because what are the men doing? They're sitting around waiting for someone to make them food. This lady is healed and gets straight to work serving others. You see, the work of Jesus in our life is so that we can in turn serve. And Simon's mother-in-law demonstrates this. Immediately after Jesus works in her life, she gets up and invests her life and her energy in serving others. And that's what God has called us to. That God's work in our lives should result in service to God and to one another because of our love for him and our thankfulness. All right, these are my thoughts for you this week. I hope they are helpful. God bless you. I look forward to being with you. I will see you on Sunday. And if not, go with God.